Hey, Coach Val.
What's up, Dr. Tip? How are you?
I'm good. How are you this Tuesday evening?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. The week is rolling.
Week is definitely rolling. Thanks for everybody joining us tonight live, those listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, even those watching the replay. Thanks for joining us tonight for another amazing episode of Tuesday Talks. So we're going to dive right in. If you've been with us over the past few weeks, we've been talking about how failure for our kids can really be an asset and what that actually looks like. And so we found a book, The Gift of Failure, How the Best Parents Learn to Let Go So Their Children Can Succeed by Jessica Lahey. And we really were struck by the summary of the book. And so then we dove in. It's 3 parts. So our next 3 episodes are going to be focused on the 3 parts of this book because there were really some great lessons in here. Part 1 is titled How Parenting for the Short Term Undermines Our Children's Long-Term Success. I'm going to say that again. How parenting for the short term undermines our children's long-term success. So even just that title of part 1 drew both of us in because we struggle with that every day. I think a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about tonight could be translated for parents and teachers, not just the parenting side. But how did this book and choosing it, like, how did that come to form for you, Val?
Well, I think as we keep doing our episodes, it just becomes clear that we focus on it. And then in our own lives, like we are hyper aware of these concepts as they're happening even more now. And so I can say currently, I'm like in limbo about my oldest son because there's a fabulous program that he is a part of, and he's not participating in it. And like to make it so bad, he can actually gain financially from participating in this program. And it's just like, it's not that he's by default he's choosing not to, so it's not an active choice to not go. It doesn't matter, he doesn't think about it. And so I was having this conversation with someone, and that person was like, well, just make him go. It involves like 2 days of after school tutoring right after school. It's really study hall, it's not really tutoring, just time set aside for him to work on his work. A once a month Saturday session where they take the kids and they give them workshops that help them develop skills like communication, like understanding how college works. They take them on trips, like fabulous.
Sounds great.
It is amazing. He participated in the summer portion of it where they actually go stay on a college campus for a little while, for like 6 weeks, and loved it, but won't do any of this stuff. And he gets paid. So when the
What?
person said just make him go, yes, I was like, that would be wonderful. And I could definitely do that. Like I could set that all up and make him go. But then, especially since we've been having our recent episodes, like, what is that teaching him? Because there's also a financial benefit on the other side of that for me making him go. So if he's not choosing and it's not enough of a priority for him, I feel like then that's still only rewarding his apathy in the situation. So even that, by itself was enough to like really grab me, and for me to be interested in this book and how I'm applying it personally with my own children.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely a dilemma because the program has all the benefits that he needs and that deep down he might want. They're paying him to go. It's like a win-win situation. But then you draw the line and you are considering not forcing him to do it. and letting him decide he wants to do it. And really, if he decides to do it, he'll get more from it than if you're just pushing him into it. He's just going to be there in the physical form, but not engaged and locked in to benefit from it. So, I mean, essentially, he's losing out if he doesn't go. You know, that's what it boils down to. But I can definitely see why you would want him to go. And as you were talking, I was thinking like someone out there could perhaps be thinking, where does this end, right? Like, what if kids don't want to go to school? Do you make them go to school? You just say, oh, you don't want to go to school, so just sit at home. Don't worry about going to school. No, there are some things that we have to have our kids do, right? You can have them go to school, but while they're there, they don't have to engage. They're just there, right?
And many of them don't. We know that.
Yes. So there are some things kids have to do, right? And the book does a really good job about discerning the have tos from the we want them tos. And so there was some really good key points. I think the book did a really great job critiquing the obsession with short term achievements, such as high grades or awards, which often come at the expense of genuine learning and that intrinsic motivation, which we have talked about on here multiple times. Mm-hmm. And the author really highlights that when parents intervene too much, children may develop a fear of failure or a dependency on others to solve their problems for them. And so we're not really giving them the opportunities to grow emotionally, grow in their problem solving skills, and also how to navigate challenges on their own when we are making them do certain things and then almost hand holding them through each step related to whatever it is that we're making them do.
Right. And we see this like in little kids often, where the smallest little problem that they encounter, they're not even trying to solve the problem, or they may have one approach, but that's the only approach that they know. And so when that doesn't work, they automatically turn to the nearest adult that they trust, and they're like, I can't, help me. I saw something on social media where people were posting little kids around like the age of 2 and younger when they were having fits, but they were fits that they were creating. And so one little kid in particular was crying. And then the mom said, show me a pretty girl. Like she was about to take a picture. The cry automatically stopped. And the little girl just gets this huge, just like adorable smile. And it's like, so kids respond to how we respond to them in their situations. And however we respond, they learn that, oh, I need to do this in order to get this outcome. And we want to be careful about how we're training them to respond to their situations.
Definitely. And I think it's important to point out that every family, every parent has their list of things that, okay, these are things I'm going to implement. You might not allow your kid to play video games during the week. Well, if you let them, they would play them as soon as they got home every day from school, all the way through the evening, not go to bed on time, not eat dinner, just eat junk food. We're not saying like take the wheels off the parenting car, just, throw your hands up at everything. Everybody will have a list of things that are important and non-negotiables for them. And she talks about that in the book as well. She gave a really good example of her second grader forgetting his homework at home and knowing that if he didn't bring his homework in, he was going to miss recess. And she noticed it as he was walking out of the door and had this moment of pause to say, do I call him back in and say, hey, did you forget something? Do I run this outside to him and say, hey, don't forget your homework? Or do I let him go to school and face the consequences of leaving his homework at home? And she reached out to some friends, and some of them were like, no, you're doing the right thing. And there was one that was like, no, you're home. You have the ability to take this to him. I think she was even going up to the school.
Yeah, she was going to be at the school that anyway.
Yeah. could have easily just put the homework in her bag and taken it with her. And she respected the friend whose opinion countered her decision. But she said, no, for my kid, this is something we've talked about. We've talked about where to put your homework in the evening so you don't forget it in the morning. We've talked about double checking your book bag before you walk out of the door. And so he hasn't done those things that they have talked about. And so she let him face the consequences. So when he got home from school, she's, looking for this sad kid who missed recess and so upset. And the outcome at school wasn't as emotionally draining as she had made the story to be in her mind. And the teacher actually, had a more positive response to him leaving his homework at home. I won't give you all the details because I want you to read the book because it was great. But that's just an example, right? So she just really does a good job in this first part of the book at examining this phenomenon of over-parenting, which is how she defines it as where parents become overly involved in their kids' lives, preventing them from any form of discomfort or failure. And this is counterproductive to children's growth. What were some of the key takeaways for you from that first part, Val?
A lot of the same. That story stuck out in my mind as well, which sparked me to, like I said, start thinking about my situation that I just talked about. There was a quote that I really liked. It says, when we intervene too much, we send the message that we do not trust our children to be competent. And this was actually something I had a conversation with another person about. And as your kids get older, how it's important that they have responsibility and that we allow them the autonomy to handle that responsibility instead of hovering over them and like double checking every 15 seconds on how they're doing and the way they're doing and things like that, because that sends a signal to the kid that I must not be capable of doing this. Or if I do it this way, I must not be doing it good enough. And by the way my parent is responding to me or the teacher is responding to me, my not good enough in this task means I'm not good enough as a person. And so we can cause the kid to kind of like shrink. And we used a word last time called arrested development. Their growth in their confidence for their abilities, it experiences a arrested development state, and then they stop trying.
Yeah. And she gave a really good example in the book about how her kid was, I think, in third or fourth grade and still didn't know how to tie his own shoes. And she thought, like, how does he not know how to tie his shoes? And then she reflected a little bit. And not only were they buying him shoes with Velcro straps, shoes that he could just slip his feet in, whenever he was trying to tie his shoe, she would intervene and say, okay, let me do it for you because they're in a rush to get out the door. Or he's taking too long, struggling too much. So she came in and tied it for him. And so she realized she was the reason that her third or fourth grader could not tie his own shoes. It wasn't because he was incapable. It was because the foundation had been set for him to have an easier way to get his shoes on with Velcro or slip-ons, or I'm going to tie the shoe for you and we'll get this done quicker. So to the kid, he's thinking, well, you know what? I must not know how to do this. This is why my mom is doing it for me, right? And I think of like why, we don't let our kids use a stove and cook when they're like 2 and 3 years old, right? They might burn themselves. The message to the kid is, I'm not old enough to use the stove, which is the correct message, right?
Right.
As they get older, perhaps we need a shift. Oh, now I am able to use the stove responsibly because I've been taught that. We wouldn't just say, oh, don't touch the stove. They're 10, 12, 13 years old. Don't touch the stove. Don't touch the stove. You're signaling to them that they're not capable of figuring out how to not injure themselves on the stove because you're constantly telling them, don't do it. I'll do it for you. So it was a good example, I think, of how, that short-term success of the kid got his shoes on and out the door quickly wasn't really set up for the long term success of the child, which goes back to the title of this part, how parenting for the short term undermines our children's long term success. And I think she just really did a good job explaining how those short term achievements can prevent our kids or our students, because this applies to the classroom too, from developing deeper understanding of their own abilities and interests. And I'm sure you can think of some examples in the classroom too. You're almost 20 years in the classroom. You had to maybe take a step back sometimes and say, okay, let me let them figure it out. Let me let them work through this math problem and see what the outcome is. And then we can go back and talk about maybe where things went wrong. But let me just let them work through the process without me intervening at every step to make sure the outcome is correct.
Absolutely. It's actually a taught strategy that it's often part of professional development for math teachers. I was at a conference recently. We had all that snow, and and I was in Jekyll Island. It snowed on the island, people. I mean, everywhere. But in that conference, that was definitely brought up, that this concept of productive struggle is essential for kids to develop grit, to develop perseverance, to develop confidence in their skills, to help them learn how to think in different ways and think creatively without shutting down as soon as they reach a problem. And the type of math teacher I am and will always be, I feel like I'm a unicorn. There's not a lot of me out there. There are out there, but not a lot. And my focus has always been on the student's greater good. I can tell you exactly how to do the steps to these problems. Okay, I can do that. But if I do that, then I'm not helping you understand how it works. And if I don't help you understand how it works, you're going to keep asking me for help for the next problem and the next problem. And for me, it's just born out of, I ain't got time for that. So it's too many of you people in here. And if you keep calling me over here to do a problem just because you get to one that looks a little different than what I showed you before, then we're not going to get anywhere. The point is for you to learn how to think. So you're absolutely right. And it doesn't just show up in math. It shows up in all subjects. It shows up in all areas of life. Our kids have to be able to take small risks and experience some failure in order for them to become self-reliant adults.
Yeah. And she really stresses in the book that failure is not just inevitable, but it is necessary for children's growth. It allows them to build that resilience as they learn from their mistakes and become more self-reliant. So one of the quotes I thought was great was, she said, in our rush to protect children from failure, we deprive them from the opportunity to develop these skills with resilience that they need to succeed in the long term. And I just had this conversation with my brother this past week. How do I get more grit, more resilience, more of that bounce back spirit from my own kid? Like, he takes a failure, a hit, didn't get something right, or something was too challenging, and then he's ready to just throw in the towel. And of course, I understand that. I run into that in my adult life sometimes. I got to give myself a pep talk. I'm sure I did it as a kid too. And so I was just struggling. How do I get him to develop some grit? And this is really what it is. It's allowing him to just fail, allowing him to have something hard that he comes up against and not intervening to show him the right way to get it done. Maybe having a conversation with him afterwards, like, hey, this might have been a better way to do that. And she talks in the book about how when you want to make this shift in your household, because maybe you've been coming to the rescue of your kids or your students at school, you've been coming to the rescue all the time. It's fair to have a conversation with your kids or your students. She says this in the book, and say, hey, this is how things have been going, And this is how things are going to be going forward, that I am not going to do. And you list out the things that you're ending, and have that open conversation. She said her and her husband had the chat with their 3 kids, and one of them was just like, whatever, halfway listening. The other was kind of just like, oh, okay. And then another was like, what do you mean? You're just going to let us just, do whatever? And so your students, your kids might have different reactions to it, but you can explain it
Right.
to them in ways that are age appropriate. And then when you find yourself coming to the rescue again, because that might be your default, in that moment to have that reflection, to say, okay, you know what? I was intervening and I need to just let you figure this out. And then just walk away. I know for me, it's harder for me to sit and watch what I think is about to be a train wreck than it is for me to turn my back and not watch it. So I would just have to walk away, because otherwise I know I will say something, or I'll like point, tap the paper, something. I will do something if I'm just standing there watching. So I think that was a really great, one of the great quotes and takeaways from the book for me. She also talked about autonomy and competence too. Did that part resonate with you?
I love some autonomy in a kid. I mean, as a teacher, I was one of the advisors for our student council, and student council is all about student leadership and government within the school. And so the essence of the kids who are right for that activity at school, they have to have this autonomy. They have to have a certain level of competence and confidence. And so one of the quotes that was in there said, children need autonomy in order to feel competent, and competence leads to confidence. And I love this idea that these things are not the same. They do affect each other. But she gave an example in the book where this kid's dad was like a very proficient carpenter. And so because of that, around the house, there were all these machines and equipment that can be very dangerous for anybody, definitely a kid who doesn't know what they're doing. And so as a kid, the dad had shown the kid how to do something, and the kid had a lot of confidence in what he did. And so he approached the author and he was like, hey, let me show you how to do this on this machine. And the author immediately was like, no. Although you have confidence in your past experience on this machine, you are not competent enough to do this without the supervision of an adult. That could go really wrong. And so as the kid got older, I think they kind of revisited it while he was an older teen, in his older teen years, where he had plenty of time to work with his dad and really understand how the machine worked. And she was like, okay, at this point, now I know you're competent with it. Absolutely. You can show me what you know. So I thought that was really important to establish the difference between competence and confidence in kids.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great even example to use with your kids too, as you're explaining the difference. And in the book, she really does encourage parents to take that step back and allow kids to make decisions, solve their problems, and learn from the natural consequences. And I found myself in this situation a couple weeks ago. So the school that Uriah goes to is a student-directed learning school. There's no teacher in front of the classroom giving instruction to all the kids about anything. They are given a map, a roadmap of the things they need to accomplish in that grade level, and it's up to them. They could accomplish it all in 6 months if they buckle down and really are on it every single day, or they could take the full school year, maybe even bleed over into the next school year. It's really up to them. And I found myself needing to kind of have a check-in with myself, because Uriah was behind what I thought was the point he should be at halfway through the school year. And so we had a come to Jesus conversation where I'm like, listen, do you want to do fourth grade work over the summer? No? Okay, well, you're really headed in that direction if you don't get on top of it. If you don't know what, one task involved, what that task involves, you need to be asking your guide at school to get some clarification, because he really was just sitting back and just, he could be that kid that in the classroom might not get the attention from the teacher because it looks like he's working, but he's really confused. He's just not asking a question. So, like, having him develop that skill and that determination to figure out the solution by asking somebody, is something that he still needs to work on and develop. And I'm really big on kids need a model in most cases to understand what that looks like. So they have weekly check-ins, and so we sat down, we practiced it. What is, you're checking in with your guide? Yes, this is your Google Doc and the things that you're going to ask about, but what is some feedback you're going to ask from the guide? What are you going to ask them about their reflection on how you're doing in the classroom? So we practiced it. We did a little role play. His guide gave him some feedback. One of the questions we came up with was, what do I need to do less of in the class? And the guy said, stop playing around. Get locked in. Plain and simple. Type it on the form. And so now he sees how the guide views his school day. As far as getting himself back on track, we sat down one weekend, looked at the things that he has accomplished against the things that he had not. I'm pressing him. What is the plan? We can't just leave these things undone. What is the plan? And he talked about a plan, and I won't lie, I held his feet to the fire. Like, you said it, we're gonna do it. And I found myself saying, I don't fail. You're gonna get this done because I don't fail. And then I had to check myself. I didn't fail fourth grade. I'm not in the fourth grade. I'm good on that. Been there, done that. Got the T-shirt. So I'm like, you're right, Tiffany. You don't fail. But this is on Uriah. And so I showed him that weekend how he can structure his day and accomplish things. And he got a lot done that weekend. He was very proud of himself. So now I told him, the ball's in your court now. I showed you how to do it. You experienced the success of it. And now you're going to finish out the rest of fourth grade, and we're going to see if what we talked about stuck or if you're going to revert back to old ways. I passed the fourth grade, so I'm good. And if you don't, then your summer is going to be different than it has been in the past, because you have to get it done. The not getting it done part is not an option. It is about how you're going to get it done. So I think if there's any parent out there, like we talked about earlier, well, my kid doesn't want to do work. He doesn't want to go to school. What? I just don't let him do anything. I just let him have a free for all. No, the end result is you're going to pass this grade or you're going to this test. Like, how you prepare and the steps you take to get to that, it might be more zigzag than streamline, but the goal at the end is the same. And we talked about establishing goals with our kids on here before.
Yeah, what I love about your example is it shows parents that, again, we're not saying just hand your kids over to the wiles of life. Absolutely not. And we've talked about on our show before that each parent has their own standard for their kids on what the expectation is for their kid. And there are times when, if there's an expectation for your child, they have no idea what that looks like, especially in fourth grade. Like, how many fourth graders really understand how to take control of their time and segment it and prioritize things? Like, that's a high functioning skill that needs to be developed. That's that frontal lobe stuff. We talked about that a long time ago. Those executive functioning skills, like, we're here to help them learn and develop those skills. And so I love how you did it in a way that, well, here's an example. Here's, how I think this could be done. And I'm pretty sure, knowing you, it was like, what do you think about this? Do you think this is doable? Is this something we want to try? And then, okay, you try it out. Well, in that, he bought into it. And then when he got the results, he was able to take ownership of those results. And because he saw it as, oh, I'm being successful, then now he knows how to decide what needs to be done to be successful. So
Yeah.
I love that example for parents and for teachers.
Right. It looks like we're headed in the right directions. One of the markers on this fourth grade plan is that he has to read 4 books. So he's on book number 2. And girl, the other morning, he got himself dressed for school, ate his breakfast. I came downstairs. Normally, he's like, I don't know. He doesn't watch TV in the morning before going to school, but he's doing something like playing with the football, something. He had the book. He was reading the book. He brought the book in the car, read it all the way to school, and then dog-eared the page and was like, okay, I read my pages for the day. I said, well, in my mind, I said, look at God. And then I said, well, great job. That was fabulous. I haven't mentioned reading that book. He knows he has to read it. He knows he has that and 2 more books to read. And so that to me was like, okay, in this moment, he was focused on, hey, my goal is to get this book read pretty soon. Let me do this now so I don't have to do it later, or maybe I'll read more later. I don't know what his plan is. I just know that my child was reading the book and ready to school on the way to school. And that is very different than what it was like before we had our weekend come to Jesus, let's get focused episode. So we'll see where it goes. I'll keep y'all updated. But that is our episode for tonight. Again, this is going to be a 3-part series. This is part 1. The book is broken up into 3 parts. The Gift of Failure is the title of the book by Jessica Lahey. And so we'll keep covering the next 2 parts over our next 2 episodes. So if this was something that spoke to you, resonated with you as a parent or as a teacher, share the episode with a friend. Share it with a colleague. Have them join us for part 2 and part 3 coming up. And let's make this a great conversation discussion. Let's just evolve and become better parents and teachers along the way. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.